I'll go quickly on. When I got contacted by the organisers, one of the things they had mentioned to me was the whole notion of Satya Nadella. Many of you may realise that he's our new CEO in Microsoft. And he recently actually did a number of presentations where he started talking about how Microsoft is going to be mobile first, cloud first. So we thought it would be an interesting way to maybe explore what that means for Microsoft to give you an idea how we're seeing cloud in this world. And if you look at the kind of well-known by now mega trends that the IT industry has been talking about for some number of years, mobility, mobile devices, social enterprise software, everything around how social is beginning to infiltrate applications, big data and analytics. Cloud really kind of underpins a lot of what they are, because you could actually talk about cloud in the context of any of those major trends. And if you think about what is cloud computing, well, I'm not going to go into this because I think we've actually heard this in the past quite a lot. Things about self-service. If I had to summarize this, I'd say it's about IT as a service. Pay as you go, take what you want when you need it, make the cost happen in your operational model or OPEX rather than a capital cost. All of these things make real important differences to how businesses run themselves and how they save money. And that's what we're finding. When you think about why businesses are adopting cloud technologies, it's all about cost reduction for the most part, in terms of whether or not they actually invest in large amounts of physical hardware and traditional IT infrastructures. If they can move it to the cloud, generally speaking, it costs less. Secondly, it makes a difference between whether or not they put that cost into an IT infrastructure that immediately starts growing older day by day. You see that in terms of things like the XP situation we have today. People who bought from Microsoft 10 more years ago, 15 years ago, I think, people are still on XP because they sunk the cost into that, and then they had to upgrade. You think about cloud services, they're evergreen. They're continuously innovating. And once you pay for them on an ongoing basis, you are always on the latest version, which takes away that whole idea of upgrading and means that companies can transform and innovate at a greater pace. And then around insight, this goes back to kind of things like big data and analytics. But it's also about how companies have much more control over what they're doing. If you know exactly how much it costs to service each of your employees, and you can turn that on and off based on what kind of employee they are, you have much more control and insight into your business and how to control costs. So they're kind of the feedback we get about why people like cloud. And it's a lot of money in it. You know, if you think about the predictions, they're saying that it's going to be $98.4 billion, the size of the market in public IT cloud services in 2016. That's 5 times faster than the growth of the IT industry in general. And the largest adopters of public cloud technology are going to be in the US and Western Europe. The fastest growing adopters are going to be in Asia Pacific. But really what I'm saying here is this is big money, big business. And what I find really interesting is, and because Microsoft is a very partner-led organization, when you actually look at cloud-oriented partners, they are the ones that have jumped on the bandwagon. They're the ones who see where this is going, who see the potential of where the market is bringing them. They are actually making more money, more profit, more revenue per employee. They're faster growing, and they have a much higher new customer, new business mix than some traditional partners who may be fixated on the old world of on-premise software only. So what we're seeing is that cloud-oriented partners are actually winning business from more traditional partners who are not moving to this cloud model. Sometimes that might be hybrid cloud, so they may be saying, well, we'll deal with your on-premise cloud, but we'll also do public cloud. But generally speaking, the folks that are embracing this change to cloud, that are looking at what businesses need and servicing them, are faster growing and making more money. And what are the workloads from a business perspective that are moving fastest to the cloud? Well, this IDC report would suggest that it's things like business applications like enterprise software, CRM, customer relationship management software, finance, accounting applications, productivity applications, supply chains, lots of stuff like that, line of business applications. And Microsoft traditionally have been playing a big part in terms of facilitating the building and servicing of line of business applications. But when you look up where we're moving as a company, and some of you may have heard Microsoft talk a lot about being transformed as a company to a devices and services company, we're not just talking about what we're doing to businesses. We're actually talking a lot about what the services are that people use on a day-to-day basis, whether it be for personal use, for entertainment, or for business. And what we're all about is how we actually build this family of devices and services for individuals and businesses that empower people, basically help people do what they want to do. And when we talk about it, for the most part, you'll hear people talk about, they show pretty pictures of devices, all the different types of devices that Microsoft runs on, and you'll see pictures of cloud, because to be honest, the way that cloud services are consumed these days, for the most part, or for the vast majority of people, are actually through devices. So what we're seeing is that you can't decouple the two trends, because cloud services light up devices and make them real. And if you're not talking about having a device strategy, then how are you going to consume those services? So we're talking about that entire solution and how that works. And what's interesting when we look at it, and what we realize, is that people who think of themselves as maybe just B2B or B2C, when they're looking at that in two different ways, that's not really how people interact with their devices or with services. That's not how they do it. People start switching between contexts very quickly these days. So whereas you might be avoiding traffic, you might be stuck in a traffic jam, well, why not take a conference call at that time? That's making the most of your time. Down at home, you might be playing a bit of Angry Birds, a bit of gaming on the side, and then you want to catch up on work email. And you want to understand how you can transition between those worlds easily and efficiently for you, and do it on your own terms. So that's really what Microsoft is about when you look at this devices and service strategy. And we've been doing the service side for longer than many people think. So when you look at where we're at with our services that are available today, you're talking about millions of users for most of them. And they've been around for, well, the first started with MSN and some of the Office stuff and Hotmail and things like that back in, I think, the 90s, right? So we've been doing this for quite a long time. And we're talking about servicing some big, large-scale numbers. This is not just a new thing we've dreamed up, though maybe we just started talking about it. What I find really interesting about these numbers is if you look at the million users, billion users in Office, look at the 8 million users in terms of Yammer. Yammer is a relatively new product offering that Microsoft acquired. This is actually a prime example of the kind of social cloud service that's actually out there and growing very, very rapidly. These are large-scale services that are being deployed by Microsoft today. You look at things like the actual numbers of activations, the billions of hours of entertainment delivered through Xbox. All of these things, and Xbox is a prime example, is a great example of a device, the Xbox, and the service, Xbox Live, that makes that experience, that Xbox experience, a better experience for the end user, and from our perspective, a much deeper engagement with the customer. And it's not just about the actual consumer services. If you look at what our traditional core server business would be, almost all of our products are now released first in a cloud version, rather than it necessarily being an on-premise version. So everything from our server software, to our database software, to Dynamics, to Office, SQL Server, Intune, management software, everything is moving cloud first. Which is where we're starting to get to this idea of what mobile first, cloud first means for us, because it's not necessarily our tagline, it's not what we go to customers about, but it's how we think about our transformation, or how we help accelerate Microsoft's transformation as a cloud and services, devices and services, or cloud and devices business. So what does it look like? What's changing in terms of how we work within Microsoft? And how is cloud kind of affecting that, or this whole transition as an industry? Well, first of all, if you look at how we're engaging with customers, it's fundamentally transformed from where we were 10 years ago. So Microsoft typically, for our largest customers, would sell what we call enterprise agreements. Now, enterprise agreements, you sign your enterprise agreement. It lasts, generally speaking, for about 3 years, though there may be kind of interactions in the meantime. But for many of our larger customers, the kind of big decision as to whether or not they go with Microsoft or not would happen on a 3-yearly cycle. Now, with services and devices, we're talking about, we have an engagement every month. That's what services means. It's a subscription. We go from this idea of a point sale, and you might be talking to our services and support people on an ongoing basis, but the sales kind of engagement would generally happen on a point basis over time. Now, it's a continuous conversation. Plus the types of customers we're talking to, rather than just be IT, is much more moving now to the business side of the organization. Because instead of us talking about just servers and how you switch them on and how many SQL databases you're You're talking about the kind of services that are going to make your office workers productive. We're talking to the marketing people about what they need from service if you're thinking about IT as a service, not in terms of the huge cost and integration and all this stuff that would have been talked about in the past, but in terms of what you actually need to run your business and make things happen faster. So the people we're talking to within organizations are changing as well. And this is all a result of the fact that we're now selling services and not software licenses that we did in the past. Then you look at our marketing. You just have to look at what's happening with Nokia and Nokia's ads for Lumia. And if you compare that, the Windows Phone, Lumia, rather than what would be traditional Microsoft marketing, I think you'll see a difference, and it's probably for the better, right? Because, I mean, this is changing how we go to market and how we address customers and consumers by thinking about devices and services rather than thinking about IT software. Our operations, our partners and channels, definitely changing. The kind of partners we work with, the folks that are driving most growth for us, very different than what they were 10 years ago. Operations, wholly different business when you start talking about selling services than when you start talking about selling traditional software licenses. And our engineering practices have changed dramatically. So for those of you who didn't catch the announcement, what Satya Nadella announced when he started talking about mobile first, cloud first, was Office for iPad. Now, I don't know if many of you remember Microsoft 10, 15, 20 years ago, but the notion that Microsoft would release Office for iPad touch first in that mobile scenario was unheard of then. The notion that we would go with what would be considered a competitor product to release our key core platform Office, unheard of. But in a mobile first, cloud first world, it's all about going to where the mobile customers are going. If people are using iPads, we want them to be using the service that we have on the back end. Why not? That's what it means to be mobile first, cloud first. So that's the change that we're kind of making. Then we're talking about all the services that go on top of that. How do you manage mobile situation? Bring your own device, whether it be a Windows device or an Apple device or an Android device. That's what the problems we're trying to solve. So let's look at cloud first, even though mobile first comes firster, as it were. The whole mobile first, cloud first to a group of computer scientists, which is where Satya Nadella first mentioned it, caused a bit of problems. Like, how can you have two firsts? What's the story? You can't have two firsts. One has to be first, the second has to be second. But that didn't sound as good. So let's just go with mobile first, cloud first. And this time we'll go with cloud first. For me, I could go with the many different cloud services that Microsoft offers. There's tens of them that we could, hundreds if you count all the minor releases that we could talk about. But Microsoft Azure is the one that's closest to my heart because we work a lot with partners who work on this. And again, when I was looking to say, well, what kind of new things does cloud services enable, I was thinking, what kind of wonderful line of business applications could I show them that would blow their minds? I came up a little bit empty. I mean, I could, but wouldn't be as good as taking the easy route and looking at a major game title. So if we think about Titanfall, some of you may have heard it, recent Xbox release. How many of you have heard of Titanfall? Okay, big release from Microsoft. 100% cloud enabled. So what I'm going to show you now is what the Titanfall team talked about and why they made a choice of going with a service rather than traditionally running on the device like many games would have had in the past.
Traditionally, building any sort of server technology has been pretty difficult for any developer. We saw cloud computing as an opportunity to introduce hands-off, scalable, on-demand resources so game developers could focus more on the game.
What that means is there's data centers all over the globe, and when you start up the game, it figures out where you are and what the best connection to which data center you have it. And it'll spin up a server, a dedicated server in a server farm for you, fast connection with, fast CPUs.
We can maximize what we're doing, knowing full well that on the back end, we have power there to take advantage of the game.
It makes matchmaking really quick, and then once you're in the game, it's a really consistent experience.
It's a more even experience. There's no host advantage. There's no worry about who's hosting what, and do we have to now reserve performance on everybody's machine.
So you don't have people doing lag switch killing, you don't have host migration, you have just solid gameplay that's fair for everybody. If anyone asks for a server, just throw them a server, throw them a server, throw them a server. And then we replenish that pool from the cloud. And so when we need another one, we just grab it down, put it in our pool, and then hand it out to somebody. So it's this constantly available set of servers all over the globe for anyone.
But one of the things we're seeing that's really amazing about Titanfall is the idea that a lot of the AI and the non-player character is actually powered by the server.
That would not be feasible to do on a game that's client hosted.
For the first time, I think users are seeing why server technology is really going to make next generation gaming that much better.
So that's Titanfall. And I love that because it's the best soundtrack you could ever have to a demo, right? But if you think about that in the context of what cloud services is bringing to it, I mean, in my opinion, if you look at game software and games, they're really where the future of entertainment with software is going. And the artificial intelligence stuff that they're doing with Titanfall means that they can personalize the experience for each individual player. These are the kinds of things that I think are really, really interesting when you start thinking about where the future of the industry is going. Another example, which I won't go into detail because I know we're running over, is around the NBC application for Sochi Winter Olympics. Like, they actually went to a point where they had 2.1 million concurrent high-definition viewers of that one game, the USA versus Canada hockey match. Do you know what it would cost to build a server farm to serve 2.1 million concurrent users for a period of 2 weeks that the Winter Olympics was going on? If they didn't do that in a service model, they would have had to invest all of that infrastructure and then turn it off and just sell it on after 2 weeks. Because they use services, they could ramp it all up and ramp it all back down again. And the cost saving was huge. And if you look at Azure and think about how we changed as a company and how we've had to change as a company, like Microsoft in the past would have brought out Windows Server, did bring out Windows Server 2003. It was 2008 before they brought out the next major release. In 2013 alone, we had this many either major or minor releases of Azure. Every 2 months, they're on an iteration cycle to bring out new functionality. And all that functionality becomes available to everyone using Azure automatically. They don't have to sign a new agreement. They don't have to upgrade. They don't have to do anything like that. It's available all the time. It's a huge change in how we do engineering. And it's showing benefits in terms of our usage. I won't go into this, but to be honest, there's a lot of people now using Azure, and it's really, really kind of taking off from our perspective from a business. Then if I look at mobile first, when you think about mobile first and you think about the messages Microsoft are putting out, you kind of think about devices. You think about, oh, look, they're buying Nokia. Oh, they've got the Surface. That's interesting. They're doing devices. But that's not what we're talking about when we're thinking about mobile first. It's not all of what we're talking about. Because the world is changing, right? I mean, how many of you have heard this idea of a chicken in every pot? Do you know what that phrase? It was kind of used in the US a lot when, I think back in the 50s, where US presidents were kind of making the point that, you know, every home should have one, a chicken in every pot, right? It actually came from Henry IV in France. People say that it could have been one of the things that influenced Bill Gates when he came up with his tagline of a computer on every desk in every home. That was his vision. Everyone will have one. Sure, they need one, right? That's what the point is. And my point is that the way the world is moving is there's now going to be a computer in every pot and every chicken, right? Because this is where the world is going to. This is what computing means in the future. It's not just about mobile phones. It's not just about the sensors in mobile phones, because that's where people go to when they think about this idea of Internet of Things and devices and mobile computing. But what it really means is this idea of computers, small computers, are going to be in everything. They're going to be in the livestock to track where they're going. They're going to be in the pot to tell you what temperature it is. They're going to be in your fridge. You've heard that a lot. They're going to be in everything. And when they estimate how many things are going to be out there, they're going to be internet-enabled, connected by the cloud. People say 50 billion. People say 75 billion. People say 212 billion. I've seen reports that would say that it's going to be up to 10 trillion. That's a lot of things. Someone has to make all these things. Someone has to write software for all these things. Someone has to figure out how all these things are going to talk to each other. Cloud will enable a lot of this. If you look at when people are thinking about this, what people are talking about, I won't go through this in detail, but you're talking about everything from point-of-sale systems, MRI machines. These may not be terribly mobile, but they are on wheels. But they're not terribly mobile, but they're large. There's a few of them. They're very expensive. Down to the idea of point-of-sale tablets that you might be enabling a sales force. They might have done it all in a calculator. Now we're talking about actually having a device where they can do all that kind of thing, bring it with them. You can talk about wearables, wearable technology, stuff that mightn't have a shell per se, but you can write applications for and they do intelligent things. Right down to the very small things that are very cheap, mass-produced, don't necessarily have any display, but they are intelligent, they are connected to the cloud. And the question is, what do you do with all these things? Now, by the way, Microsoft has versions of Windows that run on all these sort of things. You may have heard about announcements about the fact that we're making it free, Windows free for devices that are very small, less than 9 inches. This is what it's actually addressing. And then the cloud. How does the cloud deal with that? Well, they have to manage these devices. They have to figure out what's going on with them. They have to tell the vending machine, God, are you running low on stock? Where's the chocolate? The one next to my desk really needs to know when there's chocolate coming towards the end of the quarter because it has to have the chocolate. And if they're doing data analytics, they'll know that they run low every time at the end of the quarter because I eat chocolate like there's no tomorrow when it's coming close to a stressful time of work. That's the kind of insight that things are going to have to know, and the only way they're going to know them is if the cloud enables that. It's monitoring all these devices. It's content distribution about how you get information to and from them. It's remote access, how you get to the things. And it's configuration management. It's how you manage the whole thing. And these are all the problems for cloud for the future. And the opportunity for everyone here, whether you're in a business or whether you're thinking about it in the context of a career. This is where the growth areas are. These are the businesses that are actually going to be most profitable, grow the fastest, and provide most opportunities. And it's a market the size of 1.7 trillion, they estimate. That's double what I mentioned in terms of the cloud market, which was a pretty big market to begin with. But when you think about this, it's huge. It goes across all the verticals. The opportunities are pretty much endless in terms of where this is going. So I guess if I have to leave with you a thought about why mobile first, why cloud first, in my book, if you're thinking about what your next project is, either in work or in your career, if you're thinking about where you're going to go in terms of the future of cloud, think about mobile first, think about cloud first, think about what those opportunities are for you. Thanks very much.